Good day. Thanks for joining us here at Little Jaeger Studios. I'm Stephanie, and today going to do a quick tutorial on printing on color changing tumblers. Now my hands are a little cold because I just drank some water, but when these get heated up, they change color, and this changes to the base of yellow. And I have got a custom request from a friend, so I'm going to use that as an example today to print. So the equipment we're going to need today is off in the background. I've got my convection oven set and running. I like to preheat it a little bit. Going to need the tumbler, transfer, heat tape. Masking tape is my preferred method, but some people use sublimation shrink wrap. The tumbler and the my favorite Condi Pro Spray. We're also going to take the appropriate safety measures with our heat safe equipment for when we're going to be handling the hot tumbler. So first things first, I'm going to start out by trimming the transfer. I print my transfers on a Sawgrass 1000 with Sawgrass ink. And I am going to keep trimming. I always like to make sure I don't get any white left behind, so that when I line this up, there's no white beneath it. Excuse me, not so much white beneath it as that there's not any marks on the back where there's no ink because I trimmed it improperly. So I've got that trimmed. I'll set this to the side. I'm going to step off camera for a minute and mist this transfer with my Condi Pro Spray. Gives it just a light tacky feel, helps get it good adhesion on your products. It's my preferred method for most things. There's a few things I like heat tape too. And so I'm going to take this, I'm going to orientate it this way. I'm going to line it up and check to see. I like to have my tumbler standing up and kind of use the ground to help line it. And I'm going to need to do just a little trimming, but I always like to print my transfers just a little big, because you can always trim off, but you can't, you know, add back on after the fact. So I'm going to try to get this lined up a little bit better on there. So what I'm going to do next is take my heat resistant tape and seal it here. Try to line up good. And I'm going to run my fingers over it a few times to make sure I've got a good seal there. Next thing I'm going to do is tape my bottom with my heat tape. And always double check when you're doing this, making tumblers, that you've got your print in the right orientation. I have been guilty myself of jumping the gun and putting the print upside down or something like that. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to run a couple rounds of heat tape and trim it. And then you're going to see some of these little marks here where the paper's rumpled a little. I'm going to go ahead and smooth those out with my fingers for right now and get as much of those air bubble creases and such out. And then kind of rub my fingers around it. Okay. So that looks pretty good. So now I'm going to take another round of heat resistant tape now that I've got those wrinkles smoothed out, and put another as tight as I can get it, pull really hard, wrap around the edges, and again run my fingers around it, and then I like to go up and down to smooth out any creases here on the ends to get the best. And you don't want to overhang too much your transfer on the bottom, because that's just going to cause bigger wrinkles, and those are really hard to smooth out, and then you're going to get some little marks. This one's a camel pattern. I'm not as concerned about it. So now I'm going to do the top, something similar. I'm going to need to trim my top. This top is really sticking out a little longer than it needed to be, but I like to get at least 1 or 2 rounds wrapped first to get good pressure before I trim it off. And if you're new to tumblers, you'll learn that what works for me maybe won't work for you, and what works for someone else might not work for me. It's kind of like with many things in life, you kind of have to develop your own technique and what works for you and your products and your equipment, but this is what I've just figured out that works for how I like to do things, so just sharing that. So I got my little guy here in the shop with me. He snuck in trying to ask some questions. So.
Yeah, I'm awesome.
He's actually who my shop is named after. His middle name is Jaege.
And I take in.
Yep, his first name is Colton. His middle name is Jaege, and
I feel fine.
And yeah, he just turned 5 not long ago, and
I really like the toy.
So he is the inspiration behind my shop name. If anybody's ever wondered that, it came from him.
I know.
So okay, so I've got my top secured tightly, trimmed down to the length that I want it, and taped well on the bottom. You can see how the tumbler even changes colors on the bottoms. So I am now going to take my masking tape, and like I said, you know, some people prefer other methods. I've done the shrink wrap method. I just personally prefer the shrink wrap, or excuse me, I prefer the masking tape to the shrink wrap or the painter's tape. I'm going to put one last little round of tape there, so if necessary, when that's stuck now, when I go to wrap my tumbler, if I can just grab that end and rip the tape off, and it'll come off easier. So what I'm going to do now is just as tightly as possible, so I'm getting good adhesion. Take my blue painter's tape and wrap my tumbler. And it's okay to like overhang it a little bit, but I don't put like a whole lot of extra hanging over the ends, because I want to get as close as possible even heating on the tumbler. So I'm just going to do this and trim the extra off, and then patch this little hole right here. And I always like to go through and make sure it's super tight. For my transfers for these tumblers, I printed mine at 8.25 by 9.4 inches, if anyone was wondering. It up good. Do the end here. Tape. I try to keep the tape as smooth as possible, but it's pretty impossible to keep it like super perfect, so don't overly stress about that. You don't want a ton of huge wrinkles because that could affect your pressure points, but I always run my hands over my wrinkles and smooth them out as much as I can, just so that that's not a problem. I'm going to trim off the extra here. And use this to fill in my little gaps here where I didn't get the thing lined up just right, so I'm going to fill in some of my little gaps here, and should be, doesn't have to be perfect. I haven't seen much of a difference. And again, I'm going to go over one last time, make sure everything's down nice and secure. So now I adjust my camera, give me a moment. Going to take the tumbler over to, excuse me while I get everything adjusted. My oven that I mentioned I had running and warmed up, I've got it set at 350 degrees. What you'll find a lot of times is that convection ovens run hotter than normal. So if you have it set at 400, chances are you're going to burn your tumbler. So I have mine set at 350. I recommend, sorry about that, using a digital thermometer when you're starting out. Make sure that you're getting the right temperature in your oven, because they typically do not run accurate. So we're going to cook this on 350 for 6 minutes in a convection oven, and I'm going to turn 3 times. Some people do it 2 times every 3 minutes. I like to do it 3 times every 2 minutes, just a personal preference. So I'm going to pause the video for now, so you don't have to sit here for 6 minutes of it baking, and we'll bring the camera back on to show the final result. Okay, and we're back with Stephanie from Little Jaege Studios, fixing to pull this tumbler out of the oven. And here you can see the bottom is yellow. This is very hot, so make sure you're using appropriate safety measures. I personally don't feel like I can pull the tape off very good, so I always hold it with my left hand. I want to take this and pull right there. Helps get the tape off. We're going to pull the blue masking tape. As I pull the blue masking tape off, I'm going to double check to make sure that I can see my image printed well through the transfer paper, and I am seeing good signs that it's had adequate time and heat to do so. So be careful if you're doing this method of the tape. The tape is a little warm, but I tend to have a good heat tolerance, so it doesn't really bother me. But if you're inexperienced, you might want to use gloves, but I just don't feel like I have the proper dexterity with that. So I'm going to come down here I'm going to take my scissors. I'm going to do some trimming at the bottom to get all this layers of tape off. Try to get everything unwrapped as quick as I can. Sorry guys, it stuck to the paper and moved everything. And here it is. All printed, and once it cools off, this area will change colors back to the base color, and we'll see some different shading throughout there. So thanks so much for joining us today, and we'll be back with some more tutorials soon.